Right at this very moment, an invisible chemical is quietly detonating inside your brain, and it happens without fail every single time you turn on your screen. According to a neurocognitive study published in 2025, functional brain scans showed that dopaminergic system activity spikes by 47% during short-form video consumption. And what that means is every time you scroll, your brain is running almost the exact same pleasure circuit as pulling the lever on a slot machine in a casino. But the truly terrifying part is that this is not the end of the story, but the beginning. And by the time this video is over, you will understand in the precise language of neuroscience why that little screen in your hand is so impossibly hard to put down. Now imagine this for a moment. You are lying in a dark room just about to fall asleep, staring up at the ceiling, when your hand unconsciously reaches for the phone sitting beside you. In the instant the screen lights up a region deep inside your brain called the ventral striatum, which is essentially a hidden pleasure power plant buried in the center of your skull, fires up and begins generating signals. This power plant was engineered over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution to activate only during moments critical to survival, such as finding food or meeting a mate. But right now it responds without hesitation to a single red number on a screen. It is as if the fire alarm in your house were blaring at full volume, not because there is an actual fire, but because you slightly burned a piece of toast, and that exact scenario is playing out inside your head dozens of times every single day. According to the American Psychological Association report from 2024, 41% of teenagers between the ages of 13 and 17 rated their own mental health as poor or very poor. And what that means is 4 out of every 10 students in a classroom already feel something collapsing inside them. And standing right at the center of that collapse is the very screen we all stare into every day. In this video, we are going to dissect 3 things. First, why your brain reacts to a single like as though it were a hit of a drug. Second, how massive tech corporations weaponize that reaction. And third, what neuroscience says is the escape route out of this swamp. I am not going to tell you that third answer just yet. Some of you might be hearing all of this and thinking it is not that serious, and honestly, I felt the same way at first. But the deeper I dug into the research, the colder the chill ran down my spine. And the moment that truly made my skin crawl was when I realized none of this is accidental, but rather a meticulously engineered system. And you watching this video right now are already inside that system. If you have ever tried to put your phone down and felt your hand somehow refuse to move, then stay with me until the end. This is not a story about a simple habit, but a story about your brain being hijacked. First, we need to understand exactly what dopamine is, because dopamine is commonly called the happiness hormone, but that is actually only half correct. And to be more precise, dopamine does not create happiness itself, but rather creates the anticipation that happiness is about to arrive. In simple terms, more dopamine is released when you are looking at a menu deciding what to eat than when you are actually eating the food. And this means your brain is wired to respond far more powerfully to expectation than to outcome. It is precisely this circuit of anticipation that massive tech corporations have zeroed in on. Researchers at Stanford School of Medicine officially confirmed that social media apps cause the brain's reward pathway to release massive amounts of dopamine all at once, and that this pattern is strikingly similar to substances like heroin or methamphetamine. What that means is when you check a single notification, the chemical reaction happening inside your brain is traveling down the same neural highway as what happens when an addict pushes a needle into their vein. The key point here is that this is not coincidental, because in a brainwave study published in the journal Curis in 2025, 100 adults were asked to use social media for 30 minutes while their brain activity was recorded through electroencephalography. And the results showed that alpha waves plummeted while beta and gamma waves surged, which means the brain shifted into a state of hyperarousal, as if it had been dropped onto a battlefield. What is even more astonishing is that this hyperarousal did not vanish after the screen was turned off. And in the case of participants exposed to debate or news-related content, it took a full 15 extra minutes for the brain to return to its baseline calm state. Now pause here and think about this. If the average person checks social media dozens of times per day, then the math tells us the brain literally does not get a single moment of rest. In another study that tracked 500 users over 6 months, those who scrolled for more than 2 hours a day showed a 35% decline in prefrontal impulse control. And what that means is the part of your brain that acts as a brake lost more than a third of its power, which is like driving on a highway with brake pads that are 35% worn away. And the speed at which this brake wears down is significantly faster in teenagers. The reason is that the human prefrontal cortex does not fully mature until around the age of 25, and until then the brain is like a building still under construction, extremely vulnerable to external damage. When you plug in the statistic that American teenagers spend an average of 4 hours and 48 minutes per day on social media, it amounts to nearly 5 hours of daily bombardment on a building that is still being built. A study of 8,300 American children, reported by The Guardian in 2025, found that the longer children spent on social media, the more their concentration progressively declined, and there was a significant correlation with attention deficit diagnoses. So the fact that you cannot turn off the screen right now is not because your willpower is weak, but because the brakes inside your brain are physically wearing away. Now I need to pause here and raise a question as to why exactly this structure was created and who designed it, and the answer will be revealed in spine-chilling detail in the next part. But before we get there, remember one thing. Dopamine is not a villain, and the real problem is the external system that has been precisely calibrated to force your brain into overdrive. At this point, there is something we absolutely must address, because before this video ends, there is one deeply uncomfortable truth you need to know, and it is that all of this is not a bug, but an intended feature. When you peel back the internal design principles of major tech companies, the core weapon they deployed is something called a variable ratio reinforcement schedule, which in simple terms works on exactly the same principle as a slot machine. The secret to how a slot machine hooks people is the uncertainty of not knowing when you will win, and the pull to refresh feature on social media is a direct copy of that exact uncertainty. Every time you pull the screen down, there might be a new notification, or there might not, and that might be that fires dopamine in advance, and the brain becomes addicted to that anticipation. According to brainwave research confirmed in 2025, when a short-form video platform's algorithm placed a serious political video immediately after a funny clip, gamma wave activity exploded by 62%. And what that means is the brain becomes even more intensely aroused as it rides an unpredictable emotional roller coaster, and the algorithm knows this exactly, and orchestrates the order of content accordingly. The infinite scroll feature was also not created by accident, because its purpose is to make it harder for the prefrontal cortex to execute the decision to stop, and research shows that in an infinite scroll environment, the variability of beta waves linked to inhibitory control significantly decreases. In simple terms, the voice inside your brain that screams enough gets quieter and quieter until it can no longer be heard at all. When you look at the numbers that this design produces, the shock deepens, because according to the Harris poll, 82% of adult members of Generation Z said they feel social media is addictive, yet they cannot stop using it. What that means is 8 out of 10 people know they are trapped and still cannot climb out. And this is not a matter of willpower, but a matter of design. As of 2026, the global average daily screen time is 4 hours and 47 minutes. And for Generation Z, it reaches an average of 9 hours per day, which means they are spending more than half of their waking lives in front of a screen. Hidden within all of this is yet another cunning device, and that is the social comparison mechanism. Brainwave research shows that when you view someone else's vacation photos, theta waves in the temporal lobe increase by 17%. And this pattern means that the fear of missing out, which is the terror of being left behind, gets encoded into memory. And this fear reinforces the compulsive behavior of checking the screen again and again. Ultimately, 4 interlocking gears, which are likes and notifications, and infinite scroll and social comparison, are meshing together to trap your brain inside a pleasure treadmill, and this treadmill actually spins faster the more exhausted and anxious you become. And the most horrifying consequence of this treadmill will be revealed with real numbers in the next part. But before that, there is one thing I feel compelled to mention, which is that a significant number of the people who built this system severely restrict screen time for their own children, because they know the dangers of the product they created better than anyone. It is time to face the reality that the numbers are telling us. As of 2026, an estimated 210 million people worldwide are suffering from social media and internet use addiction, which represents approximately 4.69% of all social media users globally. What that means is that more than 4 times the entire population of South Korea cannot pull themselves away from their screens. A survey of American teenagers found that among those who use social media for more than 5 hours a day, 7 out of 10 showed a significantly elevated risk of suicide. And if you feel no emotion whatsoever when hearing that number, then that numbness itself may already be a sign of emotional desensitization. In neuroscientific terms, continuous exposure to emotionally intense content delays the recovery of alpha brainwaves, And this study reported that beta wave activity persisted for an additional 12 minutes after exposure to emotional content, which means that, after viewing a single provocative post, your brain cannot come down from its state of arousal for 12 full minutes. And before those 12 minutes are even up, we are already looking at the next post, and the next one after that. And the brain keeps running without a single moment of rest. A longitudinal study published in 2025 that tracked 1,000 teenagers over 2 years revealed that delta waves, which indicate extreme fatigue, increased by 50% in the brains of heavy social media users over just 2 years. And what that means is the brain is slowly sinking into a state of chronic exhaustion where sleep no longer restores energy. There is also data showing that teenagers who began heavy social media use during the pandemic still had baseline alpha wave power reduced by 18% even after the pandemic ended, and it had not recovered. In simple terms, once a brain has been conditioned, it does not easily return to its original state, and this is much like a rubber band that once stretched out never quite snaps back to its original length. In a 2025 media briefing, Johns Hopkins University officially warned that excessive and problematic social media use is accompanied by sleep disruption and attention problems and addictive qualities. And all of these problems do not apply only to adults, because according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, the average media use for American teenage boys is 9 hours and 16 minutes per day, and for girls it is 8 hours and 2 minutes, which means that if you subtract sleeping hours, these children have only a handful of hours left outside of screens. In a 30-day social media abstinence experiment involving 200 participants, subjects reported that during the withdrawal period their alpha waves were suppressed and they experienced cravings and irritability and restlessness, and these symptoms closely resembled the withdrawal symptoms seen in patients with substance dependence. In other words, the reaction that appears when you cut off screens traces nearly the same neurological trajectory as the reaction that appears when you cut off drugs. One more thing that must be noted is that gender differences exist within this addiction structure, because brainwave research found that female participants showed gamma wave responses 25% stronger when viewing visually polished content such as influencer posts, while male participants showed beta wave dominance during competitive interactions. What that means is that even when using the same platform, male and female brains get caught on different hooks, and the algorithm learns even this difference to custom craft the most effective bait for each individual user. Faced with all of this reality, the question becomes, what exactly are we supposed to do? Now it is time to answer the third question that was left open earlier. Dopamine is not the enemy, and your brain is not broken. And the real problem lies in the paradox that your brain becomes addicted precisely because it is functioning normally. The brain was originally designed to pursue rewards and social media exploits that normal design, so the solution is not to fix the brain but to change the environment. The first escape route that neuroscience offers is turning off notifications, because when notifications disappear, the anticipatory dopamine response itself diminishes, and this alone can halt the first gear of compulsive checking behavior. The second route is physically blocking usage time, because according to internal brainwave research that formed the basis for the 10-minute pause feature released by Meta, alpha waves begin dropping below baseline. After 10 minutes, so forcibly disconnecting at that point is critical for the brain's recovery. The third route is intentional boredom, because in a 24-hour screen-free challenge conducted by Stanford University in 2025, the results showed that blocking screens for just 1 day caused the brain's dopamine reward pathway to begin noticeably recalibrating. In simple terms, giving your brain back the right to be bored is where healing begins. The European Union introduced neural well-being requirements through the Digital Services Act in 2023. And in the same year, the United States Surgeon General officially warned about the developmental risks of social media for young people and recommended design changes, such as disabling autoplay, but laws and regulations will not guard your brain for you. And ultimately, creating distance between yourself and your screen is the responsibility of you yourself, who now at this very moment are aware of this truth. The answer to the first question opened at the beginning of this video, which was why the brain reacts to a single like as if it were a drug, was the anticipation circuit of dopamine. And the answer to the second question, which was who designed this, was the triple trap of variable ratio reinforcement and infinite scroll and algorithmic curation. And the answer to the third question, which was whether there is a way out, is to change your environment and give your brain back its time to rest. If you have watched this video to the end, you have already taken the first step, because simply recognizing the problem is the first switch that reboots the brakes in your prefrontal cortex. If this video meant something to you, please send it to someone around you who cannot put down their screen and subscribe. And turn on notifications so you can join us for the next story. In the next video, I will bring you an even more chilling story about what happens inside your brain while you sleep. Turn off the screen and spend just 5 minutes doing absolutely nothing. Your brain will be the first to thank you.